5 suspects were arrested shortly before and after today's funeral of notorious gang leader Sandile Bhengu.
It was September 2017, and for Sandile Chillies Bhengu, it was just another night on the job, stealing cars. He had been playing this dangerous game for years, always staying ahead of the law, always slipping through their fingers. To many, he seemed untouchable, but that night, everything was about to come to an end for Durban's most wanted gangster. Bhengu wasn't just another street-level criminal. He was a kingpin, a man who had built an empire with a lethal mix of fear and charisma. Some saw him as a ruthless gangster who terrorized the city, others as a necessary evil who kept the underworld in check. Whatever people believed, one thing was certain. uMlazi was both his kingdom and his prison. He knew every street, every escape route, every hiding spot. But even the most careful predator eventually slips. That night, as he worked on the stolen car, his mind was on business. Another job, another payday. He had no idea that time was running out, that the walls were finally closing in. In just 30 minutes, his empire, his reputation, and his very existence would be wiped out in the most unexpected manner. This is the story of the hit that took down Durban's most wanted gangster, Sandile Bhengu. Born in Durban in 1981, Sandile Chillies Bhengu grew up in a city where the beautiful beaches hid a dangerous world of crime. Many young men turned to crime because they had no other choice, but Bhengu was different. He had options. From a young age, he was smart and stood out from others. He even got accepted into the University of KwaZulu-Natal, which gave him a chance to build a better future. But while he sat in class, his mind was elsewhere. The streets of uMlazi township fascinated him more than books ever could. Crime wasn't just a way to survive for Bhengu, it was his way to power. While his classmates planned for their future careers, Bhengu was learning something very different. He studied the criminal world of Durban like a businessman studies a market. Where others saw gangs as messy and violent, he saw structure and opportunity. He didn't want to be just another street thug. He wanted to be the one in charge. So he began moving with a number of gangs. As Sandile Chillies Bhengu rose to power, he built something far bigger than a normal gang. While other criminals were happy with small robberies or deals, Bhengu had a bigger plan. He created an organized crime network that ran like a business, spreading across KwaZulu-Natal and even into other countries. One of the major operations of his syndicate was car hijacking. Bhengu didn't just steal cars, he ran well-planned operations that covered entire provinces. His group worked like a company, with different teams handling different jobs. Some members spied on targets, learning their routines. Others, dressed as police officers with fake uniforms and flashing blue lights, carried out the hijackings. Victims never had time to react before they were staring down a The real genius of Bhengu's operation was what happened after the hijackings. Within hours, stolen cars would disappear into a hidden network. Some were taken apart in secret garages, and their parts were sold to real businesses. Others were smuggled into Mozambique or Zimbabwe, sometimes within just one day. By the time the police even started their investigation, the cars were already long gone. Bhengu's syndicate had another lucrative option for vehicles that were too risky to transport across borders: chop shops. These were hidden garages or warehouses where stolen cars were dismantled within hours. The parts were then sold separately, making it almost impossible to trace the cars back to the original crime. High-demand parts, such as engines, transmissions, and airbags, were often resold to legitimate car repair shops, while less valuable parts were sold in informal markets. Some of these parts even ended up in legal dealerships, with unsuspecting customers buying them without knowing their criminal origins. Luxury vehicles were sometimes cloned, where criminals would take the identification details of a legally registered car and apply them to a stolen one. This allowed Bhengu's gang to sell stolen cars as legitimate vehicles, sometimes even through official dealerships that unknowingly participated in the scheme. Bribes kept Bhengu's empire running. He knew that many people could be bought. Police officers were paid to lose reports or delay investigations. Border officials accepted money to let stolen cars pass. Even car dealerships sometimes unknowingly sold parts from stolen vehicles. Bhengu had influence everywhere, even in the systems that were meant to stop him. But he didn't just rely on money. He used fear, too. People who crossed him or got in his way didn't just disappear, they became examples. Some victims were not because they resisted, but because they had seen too much. Everyone knew that talking to the police was a death sentence. One detective even called Bhengu a ghost because he was so hard to catch. For years, he seemed untouchable. Whenever police thought they were close, he vanished, using fake names and secret hideouts. As Bhengu's empire grew, So did the pressure from the police. They had spent months tracking him, gathering evidence, and planning their move. By September 2017, they were ready. They knew everything: his hideouts, his movements, and even his next job. They just needed to catch him in the act. But Bhengu had no idea that his time was running out. He didn't know that the police were watching his every step. That night, he was about to steal another car, just like he had done so many times before. But there was a problem. The car had a tracking device. Bhengu, always cautious, scanned the street. He had survived this long by trusting his instincts, and tonight was no different. Seeing nothing suspicious, he crouched down and slid under the car, searching for the tracker. The irony was brutal. The man who had built an empire by stealing cars was about to fall because of one. The police had been following him for weeks, but they couldn't just arrest him. To put him away for good, they needed solid evidence. And what better proof than catching him in the act? So, just as Bhengu was about to finish the job, a police vehicle rolled forward. Another blocked the road behind him. The officers knew exactly who they were dealing with. This wasn't just another arrest. This was the moment they had been waiting for. When the officers moved in, Bhengu reacted with the violent instinct that had kept him alive for so long. He opened perhaps believing he could his way out of trouble one more time. But this time, the odds weren't in his favor. The officers returned, and in a matter of seconds, the myth of Sandile Chillies, Bhengu's invincibility, was shattered forever. Sandile Chillies, Bhengu, the man who had ruled the streets of Durban, beside the car he had tried to steal. As the date for Bhengu's funeral approached, tension in uMlazi boiled over. To some, he was a ruthless criminal. To others, he was a legend. His funeral wasn't just a goodbye, it was a show of power. Law enforcement knew this. The South African Police Service, SAPS, already on high alert, ramped up security. Officers patrolled key areas, while undercover agents tracked Bhengu's remaining associates. Rumors spread that some said old enemies would use the funeral to settle scores. Others feared that Bhengu's most loyal men would take revenge. But the biggest threat came from intelligence reports. High-profile criminals were expected to attend. Bhengu's empire wasn't just about hijackings. It stretched into trafficking, robberies, and more. For the police, this was a rare chance to take down some of the country's most wanted men. The funeral, held in a Durban church, drew a massive crowd. Hundreds showed up, some out of respect, others out of obligation, and many just to witness the spectacle. Luxury cars lined the streets, their tinted windows hiding dangerous faces. Men in dark suits and sunglasses stood guard, sending a clear message. Bhengu may be gone, but his empire wasn't finished. Then, the police made their move. In a well-coordinated operation, officers swarmed the area. Chaos erupted as authorities arrested several suspects linked to serious crimes. Among them was a 43-year-old man wanted for multiple cash-in-transit robberies. Social media buzzed with rumors that gang members planned to commit crimes as a tribute to Bhengu. In response, the South African Police Service, SAPS, heightened their vigilance, leading to the arrest of 7 individuals following a night vigil held for Bhengu. The arrests only fueled the tension. In the days that followed, uMlazi became a battleground for control. Police set up roadblocks, searching every suspicious car. Extra patrols swept through crime hotspots. After Sandile Chillies, Bhengu fell in a hail of his empire was left without its king. But in the criminal underworld, power never stays unclaimed for long. As the dust settled on Bhengu's, all eyes turned to his closest allies, those who had stood beside him, those who knew too much, and those who might try to take his place. One of them was Bonakwake Ali Ntshangase. At just 24, Ntshangase had already carved out a reputation. He was more than just a loyal follower. He was a rising figure in the underworld, a man whose connections ran deep. Some believed he would be the one to keep Bhengu's network alive. Others saw him as a threat, and in a world where power is measured in threats are never left unchecked. Barely a year after Bhengu's dramatic end, Ntshangase met his own violent fate. It was the early hours of July 9, 2018, the city of Durban still pulsing from the weekend's festivities. At Cartel's, a popular nightclub in uMlazi, the air was thick with celebration, the kind that makes men feel invincible. But as Ntshangase stood among friends sipping his drink, was already moving in the shadows. The club doors swung open. Few noticed the figures slipping through the chaos, and then suddenly, they ate at Ntshangase. By the time paramedics arrived, it was too late. Ntshangase was gone, another casualty in a war that refused to end. Speculation spread like wildfire. Was this revenge? A power grab? A warning to anyone who thought they could step into Bhengu's shoes? The police launched an investigation, but in the world of crime, silence is survival. Witnesses had seen everything, but they would say nothing. With Bhengu and Nshangase both, his once feared empire began to crumble. Rival gangs circled like vultures, alliances broke apart, and the streets of Durban braced for the inevitable. More and a war for control that had only just begun. The impact of Bhengu's crimes left lasting scars on communities. Many victims never recovered their vehicles, and families who lost loved ones to his gang were left with trauma and unanswered questions. Law enforcement agencies learned valuable lessons from pursuing Bhengu. New anti-hijacking measures were put in place, including better surveillance, increased border security, and stronger penalties for corrupt officials. However, vehicle hijacking remains a major problem in South Africa, proving that while criminals like Bhengu may fall, the system they exploited still needs significant reform.